please tell us the role private equity will play in Indonesia?
I think private equity will play a significant role, mainly as a source of capital. Post the Asian financial crisis in 97, 98, there was scarcity of capital and bank was not willing to lend just right after crisis. So private equity had some significant presence before the crisis, and after the crisis we see more and more now private equity looking not only to fund a buyout or a growth capital, but also looking to invest in areas that the country would need, for instance, infrastructures. I think the role of private equity is not just bringing capital per se, but rather transforming the landscape of the Indonesian business community. They're bringing in better governance in terms of either family-owned companies or companies that strive to be in terms of managing in a competitive environment with better governance going forward. I think private equity also have a very important role to make these companies ready for globalizations, because they bring in best practices, best talents, and conferences like this will showcase how private equity operates and would be able to add value in the companies, because with the competitions and globalizations, you cannot just rely on natural resources that Indonesia have for private equity, but you need to have operational excellence, and that's what private equity would be bringing in.
You mentioned the Asian financial crisis. We spoke before, and you mentioned that the Asian financial crisis actually gave Indonesia a very good opportunity to take a step back, take a helicopter view of the entire financial system and rework it to make it better.
Right.
So that it wasn't, and when it came to 2007, 2008, 2009, Indonesia was hardly affected at all.
Right.
How important do you think that all the countries in Southeast Asia take a step back and reevaluate their financial processes?
I think you hit the nail on its head. The Asian financial crisis is like a wake-up call. We were growing very fast, and some really without solid fundamentals, and Indonesia is a classic case of growing too fast, putting more leverage and a euphoria in terms of manufacturing and industrial expansion. But the crisis was a litmus test. It was a test on how business conduct during troubled time or during turbulent times, and you see the helicopter view showed us, hey, it's good economy doing export, but going forward we have to rely more on the strength of Indonesian economy and other Asian, Southeast Asia economies. You cannot just export natural resources. You gotta start exploring the fundamentals of your domestic consumptions, and this is the story of Southeast Asia, the story of Indonesia, whereby the domestic consumptions and the domestic economy now occupies 60% of the GDP. Exports is coming down from more than 50% to around 27% now. So it's a good way to take a step back and look at a helicopter view and pinpoint where is our strength, where is our weaknesses, and it's a work in progress, and I think the Asian financial crisis taught us a big lessons.
And given the opportunity, despite the opportunity Indonesia had to take a step back and reevaluate its policies, with its current policies in place and the current legal infrastructure in place with regards to private equity, what are some of the continuous opportunities and challenges that private equity investors like yourself will face?
I think we talk about the strength, which is natural resources and domestic consumptions. We see challenges like infrastructures. It has not been significantly in terms of both private equity money and if you look at the strategic business group to invest in infrastructure, and that's the key challenge that Indonesia is having in terms of its bureaucracy reform. It's not as fast as reform in the business sectors. So sometimes licensing permits is not as competitive as other markets in Southeast Asia. Secondly would be the tariff and the tariff regime for some of this state-controlled public-private partnership infrastructure projects. So those remain a key challenges. And then you talk about the hard infrastructure, you need to talk about the soft infrastructures, the human capital. One of the things that's quite difficult to source in Indonesia is a good quality human capital, good talent to help transform the company in terms of exploring its potentials and also optimizing the value and the value creations, pretty much a strive for value creations. It is a huge shortage of human capital, and I think private equity and other investors' key challenge is how to retain talent and how to pretty much attract talent from other parts of Southeast Asia, not just Indonesia now.
I have to slightly disagree with you on that. I mean, Indonesia does have very good talent. It's just that they're not in Indonesia.
They're outside Indonesia. That's why. That's why it's a challenge. I agree with you. We have good talents, and they're just been outside Indonesia, and we need to bring them back home.
And in terms of the sectors for immense growth, you mentioned infrastructure. Are we talking about the hard infrastructure such as roads, tunnels, and bridges? Or are we talking about energy and alternative energy, clean energy?
I think across the spectrum, the road, the ports. Well, you land in Jakarta, you're not landing in an airport. You're landing like in a bus terminal. So those hard infrastructure projects would be definitely now key priorities, both by the government and the private sectors. And then you look at the enablers, which is the power sectors, the telecommunication sectors. Those are, I think, have pretty much being handled better than the hard infrastructures, and primarily because of the land issues. Land was not available for some of these projects, and these projects stall. And I think the government now addressing and having a new bill in the parliament to allow land to be available for public infrastructure projects. And then you're talking about what we call the supporting infrastructures, fiber optics. We're talking about even support such as we call it soft infrastructures like healthcare and education. Those are going to be a very key attractive investment potentials going forward.
And what about the FMCG and retail and F&B sectors? Everybody's talking about that, but do you think it's a too saturated market? Or?
No, it's a huge market, 240 million people, and everybody wants to be what we call quote unquote a population theme investment. So they see 240 million Indonesian, 7 million people each year graduated from lower income to middle income for the last 7 years. That's 50 million people. And if you're talking about 7 million people a year, that's twice of the populations of Singapore.
Yeah.
These people suddenly require more consumptions, better educations, better healthcare, and they consume more. They're buying motorcycles, they're buying handsets. Everybody wants to have a handset and a motorcycle. Now, next thing they want to do is they want to have homes. So the market is big. I don't think it's saturated. Everybody wants to get a piece of that, but you need to be careful finding the right investment platform for you, because it's a growing market and still dominated by some key strategic investors. But for private equity players, there are niche areas for us to participate.
And finally, going forward, where do you see the private equity sector in Indonesia sort of evolving over the next couple of years in 2012 and 2013?
It's a large economy, the largest in Southeast Asia, with most populous, fourth most populous country, the third largest democracy. It's definitely need more private equity players in Indonesia. We see more and more Pan-Asian fund coming into Indonesia. We never get to see them before. Like 5 years ago, nobody would even want to make a trip to Jakarta. Now we see more and more. Some I think, a couple of Pan-Asian funds set up office in Jakarta. So competitions will be higher and will be greater. I think there will be valuation issues for some of the top-tier transactions and investment opportunities, but for this large, which is about 60% of the Indonesian economy, is populated by small, medium enterprises. And this is, I think, the attractions and the potentials for homegrown private equity, independent private equity operator like us, in terms of finding investment opportunities.
You mentioned that more investment is needed and people need to go to Jakarta. How would our private equity Indonesia conference sort of does it get the right people?
Your last year conference? It's basically amazing. I think you guys were the first, and after like 11 or 12 years that private equity was missing, I look at the room. It's full. Everybody was enthusiastic. Everybody wants to be the first-time GP, which is great, And then they're finding it quite hard to actually raise money. But actually, it started a movement, and I see younger guys who came up to me, Sandy. We have 3 or 4 team members. We have a finance background. We have some capital backing. Tell us how to raise capital going forward, which is good for the economy, because more and more capital will be channeled, and these are the smart money, we call it, not the we call hot money, who will just flood Indonesia, and at the first sign of crisis then they will pull back. This is long-term money which is needed for the development of the Indonesian economy.
Thank you very much, Sandiaga.
Thank you, Bryan.